So welcome to Hustle for Good podcast. I'm super pleased to have Michael Farber from Breakout. How you doing, Michael?
Good, man. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. So we were introduced in Chicago, and now you live in New York. So why don't you tell everybody just who you are and what is Breakout and what is your Hustle for Good?
For sure. Well, yeah, I just moved back to New York. I just was living in Chicago for the past 18 months. Super transformative experience for me. Born and raised right outside of Baltimore, and have been building this company Breakout for the last 5 years. Actually launched in New York City. So prior to moving back to New York, I'd lived here for 7 years, and our team is actually based here in like Midtown South. And so, quite simply, we say our mission is to champion change makers. And the way that that's manifested is us creating a series of events around the country where we congregate and do deep dives into different cities. And for us, there's so many events out there and there's panels, all these different things. And we said, we want to do things differently. One, the word breakout was just how do we break people out of their comfort zones, typical routines, their silos, and how do we build bridges between industries, ecosystems, race, all these different things. And for us, these events and now original content and funding, and we'll talk about those things. But everything's about giving a voice to folks that are underrepresented in media and content. So it's been really amazing to meet some of the coolest stories that I've ever come across in my 35 years over the past 5. And these are sometimes unheralded community stars who maybe in their local community everyone knows who they are, but deserve a bigger stage, and that's what we're trying to build.
That's really cool. And so you said you grew up right outside of Baltimore, right?
Yep.
How'd you get to this point? Like, how'd you know that this was the thing that you were going to spend your time doing?
Yeah, I feel like so much of an early career is figuring out what you don't want to do, right? So I went to college at GW, studied international affairs, did a lot of NGO nonprofit type work, worked in the Africa Bureau with USAID, and then took this 180 away. I took 0 business classes in college, and then ended up in an internship my second semester, my senior year at a commercial real estate firm. I didn't even know what commercial real estate meant, but it was 2006, and a lot of people were going into it, and I had this I had this feeling of I don't know if I want to go, into this political route. A lot of people were going to law school. So I went into real estate for 2.5 years, economy crashes, end up joining a fledgling startup that we bootstrapped from 4 of us to about 85 of us. And I led up kind of the national expansion for that company. It was all commercial real estate news and events. Nothing super exciting and not impactful in any way. But, we built a tangible business and, event systems, sales systems, editorial, so on and so forth. So my 29th year was probably the most you could almost say hedonistic. I was just having a lot of fun in my life living in New York City and going to concerts and going to Burning Man and all these different things. And I kind of had this epiphany, and I was just what am I doing with this? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And so I did what I think a lot of people start doing is they started just doing gatherings with friends and started bringing people together and having more conversations. And I very quickly realized that a lot of my friends were starving to meet folks from outside their industry. And so for about 6 months on the side, while we were building the other company, I was just holding gatherings in New York City, and they just took off. So I ended up leaving the company that was doing very well, walking away from a pretty nice, not a monster salary, but certainly a very comfortable salary with my now business partner. And we launched Breakout. And it wasn't intended to be, impactful and purposeful. We were just we want to do something different. We know our friends who are building companies, raising money, we're all running around with our hair on fire. And it's important at the end of the day to meet people from different disciplines because there's so many skills that we can learn from each other. And that was really the initial thesis. And a lot, of course, happened once we got started.
It's crazy. We had very similar life trajectories.
Really?
Yeah, I was 28, 29, doing really well financially in New York. I mean, I'm a little older than you, but it was, pretty hedonistic. The way I described it was I was the recipient of so much things: opportunity, time, money, being
Yeah.
at the right place, right time in New York, like thriving economy, like uh, that type of thing. And it's funny when you said that uh, you started searching and you started holding gatherings, like I kind of did a similar thing. I had a party downtown. It was like a similar
Sure.
thing. Uh, I, I was definitely not as intentional as you are. I was like, let me get these groups of people from different industries. I wish I had done that, but I almost feel like there is a moment where you realize that the life that you're living at the moment is not going to be the thing that you want to continue doing, or is going to get you to where you want to be, right?
So you want to hear what my moment was? It's actually kind of funny.
That's what I
I
want to hear. I want to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was literally in Montauk over July 4th weekend
Boom.
with
There
a
you
bunch of
go.
friends in a party house, and we had a pretty fun first night. And I woke up the next day, and they were all gonna be like at the beach, more drinks, and the whole thing. And I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, what am I doing? Like, and I had this like moment. I was like fed up. And a buddy of mine who's a DC now in the city, but one who never really liked the party, but I would always probably peer pressure him to keep partying. I was like, I think I want to get out of here. I just think I want to go back to the city. I don't want to deal with this. I don't even want to tell anyone. I don't want people being like, don't leave, and doing the whole peer pressure thing. So the two of us grabbed probably a cab because Uber was barely around at the time. And we went to the train, well, especially in the Hamptons, and we went to the train station and went back to the city, and like literally Irish exited the weekend. And then we chatted the whole train ride back about just like where we were in that stage. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. And I think for me too, I think it was probably like a series of events, but I mean, it definitely involved drinking, right? Like it definitely
Yep,
involved
of course.
partying. And then you realize that like yeah, you're just not serving anyone. And
No,
yeah, it's a really interesting, and you know what too, it's like for some people the thing that I realize, it's not always drinking and partying. Maybe it's just something else. But like they're instead of dealing with what's in front of them or what they could be doing, they're sort of self-indulging in things that don't serve anyone else, right?
for sure. I mean, I think a thing for me too was, I was building, part of building this company, and suddenly had all these people on our team. At like 29, I was like an elder statesman, creating these events, which was a funny thing. And for about a year or two, I wasn't learning a thing because I basically had created the entire way the event platform was run for that company. And midway through, we started doing like a private CEO retreat, and it was a kind of like a new, kind of gave me like some fresh air to run with for a little bit. And I actually learned a fair amount from a lot of those CEOs, because a lot of them were part of these larger CEO groups that had a lot of vulnerability. And so I started kind of dipping into like what these conversations looked like. But like at the end of the day, these guys were fantastically wealthy. They didn't need me for anything. And I was just like, I like the direction I'm going with some of these CEO retreats, but I want to create like an environment where people who actually are taking risks, who actually are doing purposeful things, can actually take advantage of this. And that was like the kernel. It wasn't like fully clear.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Pieces of that were starting to crystallize a little bit.
That's so cool. I think what's so cool about that is there's an underestimated skill set that I always love to tell people. It is learn how to throw parties, learn how to throw events.
For sure.
And I remember, and I don't know, maybe I'm making stuff up right now about you. Is you were probably an introverted guy who has been thrusted into this extroverted environment. Am I
Mm.
making stuff up?
It's really funny. I tell people I'm introverted, and they're always shocked when I say that.
Yeah,
But I definitely do not get energy from big events. Like
yeah.
after a big event, or if I go to someone else's event, I usually leave so quickly. My energy
But if it's your
crashes.
event, you want to cry when it's done.
Yes,
Yes.
for sure. But no, I mean, I think I'm able, because of the rush of what I'm building,
Yep,
thrive off that energy. And so people misconstrue that as being extroverted.
for sure.
Not my natural place of like, I think where I really am.
Sure, sure.
That makes
So,
sense.
no, no, that makes complete sense. I feel like I'm talking to a friend, a longtime
Yeah.
friend. Just no,
Yeah.
because I think there's a thing too. Why the reason why I say learn how to throw events is that in order for you to grow as a person, you need to be around new and different people, right?
Correct.
New and different environments, which I believe is what Breakout is foundationally built upon, right?
Right.
And if you are at the center of those events and you control the environment, you curate the experience for everybody else. I think it forces you to become become this sort of like a true host. And I don't know. I think that's really cool. And that's a great sort of segue into okay, so you decided to like change your whole shit up, leave this
Totally.
comfortable job, but you left there knowing how to like curate these amazing experiences for people, right?
For sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, at that point, we had been doing multi-day summits, like, $1 million plus budgets on some of these events that we had done. So we had, a game plan for like logistically how this works and how to, doing conversations around vulnerability and intimacy. So there was core things that we knew. And so, we started going to some friends and saying, hey, this is what we're thinking about. This is the type of event we want to do, or would you be in if it's for this price, yada, yada. And the first event, we went a little crazy and definitely over budget. But something we had never done before. So something from doing a lot of events was like, how do you start something before you even get there? Because sometimes when you first arrive at an event, there's a lot of unwinding and unpacking from the travel. So it was either the dumbest or smartest thing we ever did. Certainly not the most budget friendly, which is why we've never done it again. But we chartered a 737 with Southwest Airlines for the first event we ever did. And we had speakers on the plane. We had people curated on the seats. And I don't know if am I muted or is my phone? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm muted.
Oh, you're muted. Okay, I
To
saw you
give you the
talking.
platform. No, no,
I,
you're.
I But yeah, and so, by the time our first event was in Miami, by the time people arrived, they were best friends. Like people still to this day went on that trip, talk about it all the time. And so we were able to set a level of like intimacy and like perspective of how we wanted the weekend to be run when we got there, which was, super special. But, very quickly as we started building, so we get back to New York City, we start doing like small chapter groups, all these different things to keep these like connections and intersections happening in the city. And people were like, well, what's next? And we had never done an event in New Orleans, really wanted to do something there just selfishly. Ended up loving my time planning that event, just culturally, music, the food, just all the things you hear about. But I would say the thing that started, the first thing that kind of started getting us down the path where we are now was, that's 2014. So I don't know, it was 7 or 8. I forget how many years it was removed for Katrina, but still the conversation everyone's talking about, and whether they were a lifer and, how it impacted their family to, an individual who maybe came to work for like, there's a lot of like PFA fellows we were meeting who are turned entrepreneurs or, just different social impact driven enterprises. And as we were planning the event, we're like, okay, so our first event was much more grounded on vulnerability and intimacy within our group. But now we're hearing these stories because we didn't have that much time to prep for the first event. It was like a very quick setup. But we had more time to prep for New Orleans. And so that event was much more of an immersive trek throughout the city, having like pop-up conversations in inspiring places and like bringing in storytellers. And so people who came on both trips were like, both were great, but you don't need some of the luxury stuff you did on the first trip. And quite frankly, the authenticity of this one is why I would come back. Like, do more of this. And so we had a few people from Detroit who came on that trip who challenged us to come to Detroit, which we ended up jumping on a plane like a week and a half later. And then we ended up spending about 8 months planning an event in Detroit for the following year. So we had been planning things at like a 3 to 4 month pace. And so we almost tripled our amount of planning time because we suddenly were like, oh, this is what the business is going to be about. This is what, the company's going to be about. We get to Detroit, it's like snow on the ground. It's like barely November. We're driving in the town. It feels like post-apocalyptic. You don't see anyone anywhere. But then every single person that we met with, of course, was building some sort of entity or business or nonprofit, or even like probably not even incorporated, but just doing powerful stuff that had a direct, impact and return to their community. And we were just, the light bulb like fully went off. It's like, okay, we're pushing in this more immersive, like conversation way. Clearly when we're meeting with folks, there's a big hesitation with event businesses. They don't actually represent and showcase what's happening in the community. So for us, it's like, we want to tell these stories that aren't being told in the way they should be. But if we're going to do that, like, we just can't make calls and just say, hey, like, we're here, like, come be a part of this thing. Like, we have a lot to learn. We have things to unlearn. We have things to unpack. And you can only build certain authentic relationships with time. So we ended up just being there all the time. And that's been a big component of how we've really built every event in every city we've done going forward.
Dude, that's so sick. I love that a lot, because as somebody that has sort of started projects in different cities, the thing that you can't ever sort of underestimate or take for granted is the time immersing yourself in a community.
For sure.
And so essentially, if you were to just like sum up what Breakout, it's an event business that champions local change makers, nonprofits, social enterprises, and gives them a platform and gives them resources and connections.
Totally.
In order for themselves to grow.
For sure. I mean, that is the way that the business works. And, we, as a way to continue accelerating that impact, we're starting to get into original films. A little bit trickier on the business model, but we've been getting funding. Like, basically, there's stories we've been wanting to tell, and then we've gone out and raised some funds to tell the stories. So our last one, The Atlantic, distributed, and it was in this Amazon Film Festival.
I saw that. Yeah.
Hummingbirds. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's the power of repetition. Like you said, hey, man, you kept getting on Instagram stories. You're like, hey, man.
You have to. It's the only way. I mean, you
don't do it for yourself, too.
Yeah, all of us are the same way. There's so many things, and we can be distracted in an instant. So to be reminded, but those stories have been cool. Like Connie, the guy in the film, he was one of our grantees. We got him to come to one of our events. We've been working with him a lot of different ways. Like, he's in the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun all the time. And here's a guy though who's like never gotten any funding for anything, but yet like you can drop him in like, a middle school or high school or elementary school in Baltimore, and he's a superstar. Like, he's got his quotes like in schools in Baltimore, but he hasn't had like materials to like truly represent like the star that he is. So now he's starting to speak nationally. He's even gone internationally, and he gets to show this like amazing film before he even gets started. So our next film is on another community member who's a victim of police brutality. It's really a mental health film. We're waiting to see what film festivals we get into, but yeah, like everything, the events are the foundation that makes everything work, because it's how we build those community relationships, it's how we build that trust, and it's how we build that continuity. And then, the films are, on top of that. And then we even launched a little foundation, which we've in 2 years given out about $100,000 in unrestricted grants. And we're hoping to grow that in a much bigger way.
So sick. Dude.
Yeah.
That's so amazing. I think here's the thing is that, like, when you think about the real reason why, right? Because you told me the why before, right? And the why to actually start it. But was there a moment where you're like, you know what? You heard a story, you saw this organization, you saw this thing, and then you're like, you know what? If it's not me, this is never going to happen. Do you remember that?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, and I think I might have told you this, the most transformational relationship, and really, so Freddie Gray, the Baltimore uprising, happened while we were doing our Detroit event. So Detroit was already was like the transformational, like, change, and like, to me, our Detroit event was like our first breakout event. Like the two before were almost like us just figuring, kind of where we were going. So Baltimore happens while all this is, I'm feeling this love for Detroit, we're building. And, as I said, I didn't grow up in Baltimore City. I went to high school in Baltimore City, have a lot of love for Baltimore City. And, Baltimore is perpetually kicked down.
In the teeth.
You bring up Baltimore, people never say a positive thing about
Yeah,
it,
for
ever.
sure. Yeah.
So in my mind, I was like, holy shit. I was like, if you had asked me when I started Breakout, could we do an event in Baltimore? I probably have said, I don't think so, just if I had to be truthful. But then when everything went down, I was like, well, if we're saying that we're about championing change makers and really like telling like these type of stories and unheralded stories, and also in a way changing people's perceptions, we have to do Baltimore. So literally our Detroit event ended. I flew straight to Baltimore that night, the day after we were finished, and ended up like basically living in Baltimore for the next like 4 months. And just like spending like day in, day out. And it was like, at that point, like every day was like a different like community gathering about like how the city was moving forward past, for folks listening to this, uprising is the Baltimore riots. But they don't like to refer to it that way. And it feels like it's not representative of what really happened. And so I would say about a month before we actually did our event, and it was probably my favorite event to date just because it's just on my home turf and just how powerful so many of the speakers were. But someone in our network sent me this article, and it was about this individual who was returning citizen, who'd done 17 years in a life sentence and was doing a lot of community work. And he was he had this little furniture business, and he was hiring other returning citizens. And it was like an Al Jazeera. It was so funny. It was in nowhere else. And so for the next like week or two, I was going into meetings being like, hey, this guy, it seems like he's a really great story. His name's Chris Wilson. No one seemed knew who it was. So I'm finally sitting at this like kind of quirky artist's house, and we're having a conversation. And so I'm like, I should bring it up. I keep striking out on this guy. Maybe I'm just not going to find him. And he's like, oh yeah, I know Chris. He's like, let me text him first though. He doesn't like people directly reaching out and see if it's all right to meet with him. So he texts them, he gets the thumbs up, he introduces us, and Chris says, yeah, I'm working at the community center, come like meet me, at this address. So my business partner was actually in town because we were kind of like putting finishing touches. And he does a lot of that like logistical operational side of our business, especially in the early days. And so we ended up going and meeting with Chris, and like we sat on like a street corner for like 2.5 hours. And he like told us his story, just from just this immense amount of trauma, to him teaching himself 5 different languages while he was on the inside, to, starting the book club, to, being one of the first people in the state of Maryland who was a juvenile to get off of a life sentence, to the fact that he had this thing called a master plan, which has now become a book, but was like basically his plan that he would write every year. So it's like, if I ever get out, I'm going to get my master's degree. I'm going to own a Corvette. I'm going to travel to a certain amount of, countries. I'm going to do X amount for my community, like all these different things. So he ended up getting out, and he was like, the judge was like, I'm going to give you a second chance, but I'm going to be watching you, and you have to live up to doing the stuff. So, I mean, the fast forward is like, he now has this like best-selling book. He's like helped like over 300 individuals get jobs. He has multiple, businesses. He's like now in the past year become like this acclaimed artist, which he was literally, I think, just doing for therapy for himself. And he like, I would say the fact that he ended up
and got the Corvette.
Oh yeah, he got the Corvette. He had a Benz for a while. I mean, he's doing well.
Oh my God, it's so amazing.
He's making it. He's doing very financially well. And it's like, I mean, it was awesome for his book tour. He was on like Trevor Noah, the Today Show, like all this stuff. But when I met him, like he was still having issues. Like no banks were really loaning to him. Like it's just constant issue. So he speaks at he was our opening speaker at the Tupac Amaru Theater at the Baltimore School of Art. No one knows what story they're about to get hit with. There's not a dry eye in the room after. Everyone's just like, I've never heard a story like this in my life. And he didn't really hang out with us for the rest of I tried to keep getting him to come out, but I mean, talking about introverted, like he's a true introvert. Like I think he could live by himself the rest of his life and just paint and be very happy. But had him come out and kind of like entrusted with us. And then, I invited him to come up to New York, said he'd never been to New York. And he just started like staying with me, started just coming up to New York, meeting my friends. And like, we developed this now as like one of my best friends. But that relationship was so transformational because we would have just talks for hours about like our lives, and business, and politics, and criminal justice, and just all the things. And he always would say, even if like I was being frustrated or a little exhausted, he's like, you can't stop. He's like, if you weren't doing what you were doing, I wouldn't have met you. And through meeting you, I got a book deal, and I've worked on bank loan agreements and like all these things. And like the better I do, the better people around me in Baltimore are doing. And he's like, you don't do that just for me, but you're doing that. The network and the platform are doing that for a lot of individuals. And like, I always think about that when like, sometimes the going got tough, or, a funder didn't come through, or all these different things. That it's a lot bigger than me at this point. It's not just like fun event gatherings with entrepreneurs. There's just a lot more at stake, and it matters. So.
Yeah. Whoa, that was a pretty epic story.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, it's pretty real.
That was awesome. My God. I love that story. I mean, and I'm sure when you are in a moment when you're in like, because, it's like, it's kind of like that, that expression. Because like when you want to build something that has impact, that has meaning, there are going to be those obstacles, and then there's going to be those bright shining moments or beacons of hope. And it sounds like this guy was for you.
For sure. 100%. And there's been, so many along the way as it's grown, but I mean, the indelible mark that he's had on my life is huge. I mean, it's just and then I mentioned earlier, I said learnings and unlearning, and it's at times it feels like there's more unlearning to do. And so I've actually even been starting to talk about this a lot when people ask me about like, talk about your entrepreneurial journey. And it's like, I mean, I feel like it's still very early on with Breakout, but the real journey for me has really been like being a white dude and like just encountering or not encountering, but like facing full on like race in America and my place in it and how I'm interacting in it and how I show up. And that's where the unlearnings are like far probably larger than the learning sometimes. And yeah, it's been really, really powerful to fundamentally changed my life in a bigger way than I think the entrepreneurial side.
So yeah, so that's super interesting. I mean, obviously when you are in a position of like, when you want to make an impact, you have a business that's around impacting, and you're surrounding yourself with other people that are obviously different than yourself. I first have to say, as a Black man, I'm very happy to have an ally like yourself that is championing underserved communities. Because I used to say the most dangerous person is an educated white woman, but the second most educated is a white man. And
sure.
Because of the amount of, and I grew up like with prep, like primarily I went to like all white schools. So I know the good side, the advantages, disadvantages that could happen. And I would have to say is like, what if you feel comfortable enough talking about like, what advantages has that happened, or impact that it's had on your life, and how have you sort of leveraged that for good?
In being a white man?
Yeah.
So I mean, look, it's super clear. Like beyond the obvious privileges, like specifically as it translates to Breakout.
Yeah.
I mean, I get to come into a city and like meet with everyone.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I have enough like allies or people of color who from doing so many that they're going to introduce me to some frontline people, and I get to like cut through because of that. Right. And I also have people from, doesn't matter the race, but like I can walk into like a mayor's office or a major foundation head. And I have to imagine it's a huge part of just me being what I am, that I get like the benefit of the doubt at a higher rate. So it's like every time I'm doing these events, like people are shocked at the meetings I get in all these cities. They're like, how are you getting to these people? And I for sure think I'm pretty good at getting meetings. So
you got hustle, you got drive, not to discount, like you've got the skills. Yeah.
So that is there, and that is a part of that. But probably at the rate and like the depth that they come, for sure that is there, right? I think there's just like, it's shitty. There's got to be like a higher inherent trust. as like, here's this white guy, went to good schools and he's like coming from New York and blah, blah, blah. For some people, that's a discount for sure. So they're like, who the fuck are you?
Who
Why
the
are
fuck
you?
are you? Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when it comes to, I would say, some of like the stakeholders, which are predominantly white folk, that has, I think, for sure been something. So, I think for me, what we've tried to do is say, it's really funny because I'm starting to speak now. Like I'm starting to do podcasts and things like that. But really for the first 5 years, I never spoke anywhere or in
Yeah,
anything.
for
And
sure.
because a big part was like, I need to use my privilege to put other people forward who have, in my mind, vastly more interesting stories, and deserve the stage. And if I have
Yeah.
the privilege to be able to create the stage and have people believe in what I'm doing, then that's how I need to foster it. So like from the people that we hire in market, to the stories we're choosing to tell, to the funding that we're doing with our foundation, to the stories we're telling with our content. There's a very big through line that we're predominantly focused on people that are not represented anywhere as high in the press and in media, and that's people of color, like, and
Yeah.
predominantly Black and Hispanic. So,
Yeah.
and the cool thing about it is like it doesn't even feel like it to me. It's not like a thing where I'm like, we're just like going out of our way. It's just like, these are great stories. They deserve to be told.
They're great
It's
stories.
frustrating that they're not being told. And it's like
Yeah.
a byproduct of that is we also get to show more representation by doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, it's just trying to do some good with the privilege I'm clearly afforded.
And I would just have to say, like, I just want to acknowledge like your, not just your place, but the platform that you're giving. Cause I think too, like when you see organizations that are doing like amazing transformative work, and I know you do this, like you sit down and you're talking to somebody that has so much heart and passion, and literally all they need is $2,500. You're like, oh my God,
That's
like
literally why
that's
we
all you
started our
need,
foundation. That's
right?
literally why we started our foundation.
Yeah.
Was, I mean, I had the amount of conversations we've had with people that are like, I'm doing all this stuff, but like I need $600 to pay my rent this month, or I have a credit card bill, or like I need to like wire a family member X amount or whatever it is. But there's always these little things, and when you have those things, you're not thinking as clear as you can be. Or I need $1,500 just to prototype something, and like I can't get from A to B unless I have that $1,500. It's not. It's like a number that like to certain entrepreneurs in certain white spaces, they're like, you can't raise that. Well, like, guess what? People don't have friends and family around. Friends and family around is like a very like privileged place to be in. And the
Yeah.
vast majority of successful entrepreneurs start with friends and family around.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that was basically what we started our foundation was. In my mind, it's basically like a friends and family, like mini seed round, except I don't ask anything from it in return. I don't ask you to fill out a grant form. We basically just say, you're already doing good work. We usually do it through Instagram challenges, but to have people nominated in, but you're validated. You're good. Keep going. If you need us, please let us know. Oh, by the way, we have events and places where you get to meet more people. Like, we're going to hook you up to come to them now that you're a grantee. So like, don't worry about like, can I afford this or not? We're going to make sure you get there. And so there's like multiple touch points, but it's literally what you said. It's like, it's crazy how many, like, it's such a place of privilege when people are like $3,000 or $5,000. I'm like, yo, that's everything to so many people. And that's you being able to prototype your idea. Like, that's huge.
Yeah, and I would also argue to say that like if you're the type of person that like 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, even 10,000, like you can blink and you could get that tomorrow. Like you should be like channeling that towards you know towards
Someone
good,
else.
towards
Yeah.
someone else. Exactly. So,
Sure.
break down just because this is the Hustle for Good show. It's
Sure.
like break down how
How like the
Breakout
business
works.
works?
Yeah. Because I mean, because you mentioned foundations, and then there's ticket prices. Like how does it all work?
Yeah. Yeah. So
And wait, and the most important thing is like, how did you know? Like I knew for me, like as soon as I had enough money to pay myself for like 6 months, right? Like I was like, and I stopped paying myself $50 a week or like $100 a week,
Yeah, no,
or
no, no,
like,
real.
like those types of things. Like, it's like, how does it work? And then, yeah, what sacrifices did you make in order to get to where you are now?
For sure. Thank God for Airbnb, especially before they like did tax stuff with it, because like
Yeah.
that's pretty much how I was supporting myself. I was like Airbnb, my place. Every time I was gone, that was like basically just getting my rent down to zero, and I got really good at that. But look, our our first investors, we don't have investors, but at the end of the day, the people who bought tickets for us and kept us afloat. So when we first started, our tickets were like the first event was, they were 2 to 3 thousand. Then we dropped them to like 1,200 to 1,800. And they've gotten as, we've been able here and there to offer scholarships in the 300 to 500 range, but they usually are like 750 to 1,500. And so it's like people get, hotels, foods, and accommodation. And so for the like our artist nonprofit folks, as we've grown, we've gotten brands and foundations who will like have a certain amount. So we always have like a block of tickets that are like already funded. And what we usually do is we work with like groups that are like, I'm a Baltimore group, I'm a Chicago group, so I want to fund like 5 or 10 individuals from my city to go to Breakout. So we've had to figure it out. But the first like 2, 3 years, we didn't really make anything. We were basically like flat. And so I had saved some money from the first job, or the job I was doing before this. Thought we were going to start making money much faster. Totally didn't understand how hard it was going to be. So definitely put myself in some somewhat real credit card debt, because it was like I had savings and just kept watching it go to zero. And then I was like, well, we have to keep going because like people are loving these events, and it's like, and then for a little while we were charging like a $500 a month. I'm sorry, a year membership fee. Because we were doing in New York and LA and Miami, a few markets, like a ton of local events. And people were driving all this value from the interaction. So that model never fully worked, but in the early days, it was enough for an operating budget to pay ourselves a little bit. And the good thing is, like, as it became clear what this model was, and as brands and foundations were recognizing, like, okay, these spaces, for them at first, especially the foundations, are like, this just seems like a fun weekend. And it's like, well, no, like, people have to have like authentic relationships to learn how they're going to build together. And
It's
so
like
what
a country club. It's like, I mean,
totally.
golf outing. However, we dance and we do street art and we listen to storytelling, right? Like,
For sure. It's like,
yeah,
our crew doesn't want to go to a country club, and most don't go to church. So it's like,
yeah,
you have to have some sort of space of like where you're convening. So, the bigger, like, so we're a for-profit entity. We still sell these tickets for every event. The tickets barely basically cover our like baseline costs, but don't pay the team or anything. So, we need like large corporations will sponsor events because for them, most of the time it's coming from certain budgets that are already funding local programs. And so they want to have those programs amplified. They might have some sort of budget that's funding locals to attend. And so, especially on the foundation side, I would say, which has actually become a lot bigger funder, which I didn't think could be a thing to a for-profit, but some of the large foundations don't care at this point. They said, hey, you have created this large peer network that we could never replicate across the country. We're giving out all these grants, and we want our grantees to go somewhere that is like more exciting and dynamic. So yeah, we work with these large entities who basically like, they want to re-energize their local change makers in their city, because like if you're in a smaller market, that's the big thing. Like, how do people
like
not move to
Tulsa,
Chicago?
right? Like when
Like
you
Tulsa.
saw Tulsa, when you mentioned Tulsa, when you announced it, and because you're going back there this fall,
We're
right?
going, we're going back to Tulsa. We work with a large foundation there that does work in all different ways. And after the event we did there, they said, look, we got some great press out of this. Great. You brought some cool people from different cities that are now talking about Tulsa where they are. Great. But the number one reason we want to keep working with you is we've never had our local leaders be so amped up about like their purpose of being here and the work that they're doing. And for them, that's everything. Because like, they can't have these people moving to LA or other places. They need them staying where they are. They need to feel like they're recognized for the talent they're doing. And it also doesn't hurt that they're like, oh shit, I don't have to necessarily move immediately to New York or Chicago. I now know Steve because he came to Tulsa, and I can
Wow.
drop him a note and maybe he can make a connection for me. So
Mm.
that's been a really powerful thing with the organizations that we're working with, that they know that there's really no other local groups that have kind of the reach that we do. Even though we're still like the small entity, we do have a very powerful group that's in like 26 cities.
So sick, Michael.
Yeah,
Dude,
it's a
dude,
hustle.
it's a hustle for good. Um, what's next? What can we look forward to seeing from you in the future? And I don't know. I'm like,
Yeah.
when I heard about your next one, I'm like, I'm gonna be out of the country. So like, if you get
Sure.
me dates for 2020, I I will mark it down, and I want to be involved. But
We'll give
how
you
can
dates.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
I want it. How can people get involved and learn more
So,
about the work? Because here's the other thing too, without sort of naming names, that there are entities similar, but that cater towards a different demographic.
sure.
That if you are pushing more towards the, either the indulgent or like, I
Yeah.
mean, there are entities and communities for everyone, and so
So we're
I
looking
would.
to why. Yeah. So I think going where you're going. So one, we're actually like experimenting with a new local event that we're going to actually launch in Chicago. We're doing it on August 24th, and we're still like, we have an idea of what it's going to be, of course, because we have a whole plan for the event. But so much of it is also taking feedback. But it's like a $20 to $45 event. We have even more reduced pricing for people if need be. The point is basically we want to start widening the funnel, because what's happening is people, well, one, you should follow us on Instagram at Breakout, because every month we do funding challenges. You get to vote in them. You get to see the stories we're highlighting. It's a really great way to just like get a starting point of like, who are these stories? Why does it matter? And I hope that anyone's just inspired to follow them. But we're looking to create this series Breakout Local, which we're doing start in Chicago, because we want to widen the funnel. Like if you're someone who cares about impact, maybe you haven't started something yet, but you want to start something, or maybe you have started it, but you have no funding and you're just trying to gain more skills. These local events will be these like 2 to 4 hour mini hits where we'll be putting together some of our top thought leaders that we're highlighting as the people running sessions. So now that we've done programming in 15 plus cities, we have a pretty deep bench of like thought leader experts like yourself, who basically are excited to put their talents to work and see how they can onboard kind of the group coming up, behind them. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Chicago's August 24th for people who follow you from Chicago. And, the goal is to be rolling these out in Baltimore and Philly, all across the country. So that's really exciting to me because, it's not price prohibitive for the most part. There is technically a price, but for the most part, it's not super price prohibitive.
For
And that's
sure.
really the direction we want to be going into. We want to widen the funnel of people who are part of this, like, good hustle movement,
Yeah.
people who give a shit about where they live and want to, see how they can do what they, their dreams want them to do.
Well, and I do want to say is like, if you can expand upon this thought, was that like when I heard my friends, so like two of my friends, Victor and Mickey Reynolds, like two like longtime supporters of my organization, they went, when I hear them talk about Breakout, it's like, it sounds like this little bit of a cult, right? Like it sounds like
Yeah.
like this little mini movement of just like completely off the beaten path. Like how would you describe the maybe this is, two more questions. Like how would you describe the culture, and how did you sort of foster and curate that? Like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because like I think that's an
Sure.
important distinction when you're building something, or just even looking to make changes. Community, right?
Yeah. So, I guess the fortunate thing, to your point, or what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is every city that we've gone into, we spend so much time on the ground, and it's like endless coffees, endless lunches, going to drinks, just constant conversation. And so every event we do, we have a certain amount of locals who are either participants or like showcase, or participants and showcase in a bigger way. And then we like do our damnedest to make sure that they come to the next event, like no matter what. So we can get them on the road team. So it's not just like, oh, I was like, I was showcased by this group, I spoke, and that was it. And because we, I think, done a really good job of that, it's like you have this group that's like grown and grown. That's like, yeah, like I've spoken at this event. Like I see firsthand like the time they put in to build it, and now I get to see it from the other lens. And now for anyone who's new who comes, I get to share my personal experience of not just being an attendee, but actually seeing firsthand the amount of time they put in the community. And so what ends up happening is they're really our front lines are our attendees, you know, of really sharing the word. So like when we sell tickets, for the most part, I mean, yeah, I meet people, our team meet people like yourself that we really love and like, we got to get you there. But most of the day we just get emails in being like, I just ran into Mickey, or I just ran into Victor. They're saying we have to get in the mix. And the people who attend our events, they don't want them to be big. They don't want them to get huge. They really like the intimacy of it because they really want to foster these relationships. And so they care deeply about who attends. They really like, they spend a lot of time on like thinking through of like who would be the right person. And I think it's for anyone who's attended, they realize like the right type of person is someone who really wants to think critically, who wants to listen, who wants to lean in, who wants to see how, if it's the right place for them to speak up, how they might be additive or collaborative to what's being done. And that's just been like a cool thing. It's like people come from every walk of like we have teachers, we have financiers, you know, we have healthcare people, we have finance people, but they're all people who give a shit at the end of the day, and are really there to learn and listen. And I tip my hat to our community because they care so tremendously. And it's a culture that, yes, I would like to think that we instilled and we made a part of it, but they have really fostered and helped grow. And quite frankly, every city that we've, for the most part, ever been to, a lot of the funding that comes in, the front line of us getting it is our community, almost every time.
Sick.
Yeah.
Sick. The last question, what does hustle for good mean to you?
I mean, it's interesting because like hustle, I like the hustle for good because hustle at times has been taken in a negative connotation, even though like for so many of us, it's what we like have done through and through. So like it has a special place. And I guess in my mind, I mean, to do good, unfortunately, in this world goes against bottom lines and goes against like typical capitalism. And it means you have to be really creative sometimes to get where you need to get. And I think that's why some of these impactful stories are more often than not the most inspiring, because it's look, if you told me, hey, I want to go sell, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm like, oh, doing what? You're like selling real estate. It's like, I mean, okay, that's like cool, I guess. That's like not necessarily for good and it's a super linear path. But like the things that you're doing and that our friends are doing, like to do what we've chosen to do, like it's a real ass hustle to get to that place to actually, like almost every one of us has not paid ourselves for at least a year or two, or crashed or had to call in so many chips. And so when people see us like traveling or speaking stuff, they just think we're killing it now. And technically from where we came from, we are. But it is a lifetime hustle to make this work, because we're trying to really change the way people look at some of the stuff. And also, I would say, like, change the way people think of good as not just like a byproduct or giving back, but like, how do you do something pushing it forward? So that's the hustle.
Dude, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And I also, again, I just want to acknowledge, I don't know, just you as a sort of ally and as a white man who's sort of chosen this path. I want to just thank you and acknowledge you for doing that. But also too, like the vehicle in which you're doing it and the ambition is so inspiring. Like I love it. Remember I started saying, it's like, there are people that are doing this, but they're doing it for other reasons. And I love what you're building this for, and who you've got involved, and the people that I've met so far are just really amazing, intentional people that care about holding space for, you know, for people that have stories that nobody will ever hear. And man, dude, I'm even more of a fan of you now. And I just know that I have your back, and you have another sort of cheerleader on this side for you. All right. Thank you so much for your time. This is such a conversation. I'm so glad that we had this conversation.
This was awesome. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you doing everything you do. And look, you got to get more of these stories out there. So keep it going.
All right, dude. Thanks so much, man.
All right, be well.
All right.